Good morning, everybody. John Sfiocla here for GAI Insights, bringing you the news, essential, important, or optional. Put time in your day and thoughts in your head. We have 5 articles we're going to review this morning. We had 6, but one of them actually disappeared overnight, which is kind of interesting. Anyway, the first article we have is kind of an interesting article by Anthropic that talks about should we worry about model welfare? It's not really an article, it's a 40-minute conversation between 2 folks at Anthropic. And what I would recommend is taking the transcript and putting it into a robot. And it basically makes an interesting moral argument on whether or not. Here, let's get Kevin. Oh, morning, Kevin.
Good morning. Sorry I'm late.
No problem. We're getting into the first one. So this first article is really an interview, about 40, just under 45-minute interview with a couple of the folks from Anthropic. And they're getting into issues around whether or not we have to worry about the morality of how we treat models. And the recommendation here is that, models are going to become more and more conscious. And the person they're talking to is one of the leading lights in consciousness research. And I put myself down to review this article. I thought it was optional. First of all, I don't buy the argument that we understand what consciousness is and that these machines are conscious. I think they already think. And the question of, they don't think like humans do. They think in their own way, just the way a plane flies differently than a bird flies. And they're suggesting at the end of this, one model we could think about is how we think about animal welfare in the context of our food supply and cosmetics and drug creation and so forth. And think of the ethics of dealing with these smarter and smarter models and machines like that. I don't find that argument convincing. I'm still a bit of a materialist and think that they are things, and we don't owe them any kind of moral standing. But I thought that the article was and the interview was optional. What do you guys think?
I tend to agree. I thought it was refreshing, interesting. We've reached an interesting point where we need to be a little more philosophical about what these AI models mean to humanity. And it was nice that a vendor has that conversation. But I don't think ultimately there were strong takeaways or tangible aha moments for the AI leader. So optional, I think, makes a lot of sense.
What do you think, Amanda?
Sorry, I'm stuck here. Yeah, I think for me, I'm kind of torn. I think I'm more on the optional side on this one.
Yeah. All right. Yeah, I agree with you, Kevin. I do applaud Anthropic for really trying to get at some of the, I think, issues around explainability, moral reasoning, the constitutional AI, and so forth. It's good to see. But this particular vein, I don't think is that important for our AI leader. All right, so Ankash, we're going to name this one optional. Next.
The next one talks about AI model tag transparency that works for little tech.
Oh, shocker. Andreessen Horowitz doesn't want regulation. Now, there's a surprise. Okay. Kevin, what did you think, given my cynical introduction?
I had somewhat similar initial reaction. They've obviously been politically active and active proponents for reducing regulation and so forth for startups. And I think it's great that they're standing up for little tech, as they call it. I went through an interesting evolution as I was reading it. Initially, I thought optional or maybe important. But by the end, I thought, I don't agree with some of the assertions here, and I probably would have written the article differently, but I do think the subject matter is essential for today's AI reader. Essentially, they're looking at ways in which there's a potential patchwork of regulations, each of which has a different piece of the elephant, but puts a lot of overhead on startups as they build AI models, as they build AI applications that are based on models they might not have developed. And there's creating sort of this onerous red tape for startups that doesn't necessarily really give a peek into exactly how models work, because developers could well be building applications without fundamental explainable knowledge of the models themselves. That's the world we live in. Then they kind of veer off into this topic about the constitutionality of requiring disclosures, which I thought was beyond their charter. Interesting, but beyond their charter. I did like the notion of having an AI fact sheet, as they call it, where you list some very basic things about an AI model and a product that's based on that model. However, it really didn't get to the question of explainability. What's under the covers of how these models work. It was more sort of what's the knowledge cutoff date, when was the product released, where's the company headquarters. Those aren't big steps forward. All in, it's an important topic. It's an essential topic for people to be aware of, because there will be more type of political pressure and more type of inspection of models and how they work. So overall, I think it's worth reading, even if I don't necessarily agree with their fundamental recommendations.
Yeah, I had it as optional. Maybe you're convincing me that for the topic area, the thing that's struck me is so ridiculous is if they want transparency, I mean, they don't even talk about what the training data set are, and they stay away from that entirely because much of the training data was stolen.
How constitutional is that?
Yeah, I mean, come on.
That's a fair point.
And a number of folks in Silicon Valley are saying, hey, copyright and intellectual property should be just, done away with. It's like, wait a second. Anyway, but yeah, they completely duck the issue of training data, which to me is absolutely clear that, you should at least, if you can't get your hands on the training data, at least understand its provenance. Like, this is what we put into the model. I don't think that's overburdening anybody. So I hear you. I disagree with their point of view, but it's a important area. What do you think, Amanda? We got an E, we got an O.
Yeah, I agree with also it's an important area. Yeah, I'm stuck, so I could be right in the middle with important. Maybe we should just go with important today on this
On
one.
average, we could be important. I think
On
that's
average,
fair.
it could be important.
Yeah.
All right, let's give it an important. I'll be comfortable with that. Sounds good. All right, Ankaj, next.
Okay, the next one is a case study from AWS, and it talks about how Infosys improved accessibility for event knowledge using Amazon Nova Pro, Amazon
Yeah.
Bedrock, and Amazon Elemental Media Services.
Yeah, here we have Infosys actually using AI in an event. It's something that we're going to be doing in this fall in our event. What do you think here, Amanda?
I think it's interesting. I like all the diagrams, and I think it's a easier read here. Not too technical, that I think the leader can pretty easily digest this. So I can agree. I think this one could be an important.
All right, I was on the border between important and essential. I do think that events are just starting to get at using AI in the actual experience of the event itself, as well as before and after. What do you think here, Kevin?
Once again, appreciate AWS drilling down several levels. They do a great job on these case studies. We've talked about them here before, and I could veer towards essential for that reason. Yeah, I thought it was great material. I think either important or essential, I would be good with. The one point that I struggled with as someone who was in the data streaming world for a long time, they talked about streaming and then they talked about events. And in the real-time data world, an event is a piece of data that you stream. And so that confused me because they were talking about physical events where people go and put on badges and so forth. They weren't talking about a piece of data that you put into a streaming pipeline. So some of the terminology was a little confusing, but beyond that, great material and very relevant.
All righty. You guys okay if I give this an essential? Because I think there's the whole process of event experience, I think, before and after. I mean, the way we're thinking about our event for the fall is that an event is a punctuation point of a conversation with an audience. You know what I mean? And that's before, during, and after. You should have access to what's in that knowledge base, right? All right, we're going to give this one an essential. I'm just going to shout out to one. We had one that was how Webtoon Entertainment built agentic workflows with LangChain to scale their story capability. And now, for some reason, overnight, The article has been disappeared.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah. I was going to give it an optional. I signed it to myself. It was kind of a thin story about how Webtoon took their extensive library of characters and stories and so forth and categorized those and used LangChain as a way to do that. Although it was very light on any operational metrics and so forth, so it's going to get an optional anyway. So that one we're going to rate optional. Ankaj, next.
The next one comes from Meta and talks about how Litmus, which is a learning management system, is using Llama to make corporate learning more intuitive.
Yeah, here we have Meta coming through on this one. What did you think here, Kevin?
We're all knowledge workers, and I think we all love the idea of having a super smart librarian on steroids that will stand up and say, "Let me go get that," and they come back with 3 other books that you might find interesting, and it becomes a very rich experience in which you indulge your curiosity to learn. So that's a great use case for Gen AI, no question. And there's some detail here. It's not a new use case. It's not a particularly groundbreaking set of facts or aha moments that they present. So I'd rate it important rather than essential. But I do think this kind of thing is going to be a powerful and increasingly mainstream use case for the knowledge worker. The one other thing I would add is that we've had a platform to explore, learn, surprise oneself as part of the research process for about 30 years, and it's called the internet. And it's not a bad one. And it puts a little more onus on the user, on the human, to
Yes.
ask questions, indulge, to go into rat holes and so forth. And I hope that people still use the internet because that's a good way to have maybe new surprises as opposed to things that the model's been trained to push you towards.
All right. So
I think important.
Amanda, what do you think?
Yeah, I think this one's important for the leader. Again, just reading, but well, I don't know. I guess I go back and forth because again, sometimes whenever it seems very producty, then I'm a little nervous about saying that. But I don't know. I could agree with important.
All righty, so we have an important. I'm happy to give it an important as well. I do think there's a big area. For those who are interested, I'm going to post a thing. I did a talk at MIT last year on what I called Socrates at scale, basically how you can use these new models to leverage learning and make the argument that the dialogue part, Kevin, yes, the internet's been fantastic, and I agree with you that people we hope that people continue to explore and learn with that. The distinction here, I think, is the notion of tutoring and that the actual conversation is a big part of the learning process. And before we had industrial learning, brought to us by the Prussians, that was the nature of learning, right? Everyone was tutored. All the founding fathers of the United States were tutored. Alexander the Great had Aristotle as his tutor. And tutoring is vastly more effective. 2 standard deviations, better outcomes. So, all right, we're going to give this an important learning, huge competitive issue. If your organization can learn 2 standard deviations better than the competition, unless you're learning silly things, you're going to win in the marketplace. All righty, last coming up, Pankaj.
So the last one talks about Arcana, which is AI voices with vibes.
Yeah, I don't know about you guys. Trolling through these voices and these conversations, it's like I can't believe I'm listening to a machine. I mean, the pauses and what's the word? I forget the name of the word that is about basically your tone and the interstitials and your pauses and starts and stops and anyway, it's just fantastic that this stuff can do. What do you think, Amanda?
Yeah, I think for that alone, it's an interesting read. So I mean, but again, I think for the typical leader though, even though this is cool stuff, I think it's more optional than important. But again, I agree with you, Dr. John. It was a pretty cool read if the leader wants to check it out.
Yeah, what do you think, Kevin?
I guess I'd go on the important side. It's not new or earth shattering. It's pretty fascinating as a use case. I think that more and more we will be listening and talking to interact, to learn and engage, as opposed to typing. And so this is another way in which that's happening.
Yeah, I think I was going to give it even an optional, but then when you start just to see the quality of these things, I mean, and just the variety is just amazing. I don't know, Ankash, if you want to just hit one of these, I think we could. I don't know if we can hear it back through your machine. We can give it a shot. Yeah, we can't. We can't hear it, but yeah, it's really impressive. All right, I think I'm going to give this bad boy an important, just because it's such a beautiful set of I guess it's prosodic. Anyway, the quality and variety of the voice here is really getting human-like in a deep way, and lots of variety. The kind of voices you don't always hear, not the robotic or kind of TV voices you often hear from the models. These are have high variety and high fidelity for true like human variety. Okay.
Yeah. It is interesting to think about.
They have background noises as well. Cool. I love it. Oh, background noises or voice noise. Anyway, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Kevin.
Oh, I was going to say it is interesting to think about the need for human-to-human interaction. I think we all missed that during COVID, and that was one thing we learned to do. People standing next to people is invaluable, and speaking to people. And I'm still a little skeptical of the degree to which machines can be a substitute for that.
Yeah.
We're certainly increasing the level of engagement, but there are ways in which we could be testing the boundaries in maybe unsettling ways. That notion of an AI nanny that can work with your kids, never get tired of reading them their favorite book, admonish them without losing patience and stuff. Those are all good human-like interactions, but are we losing something on the human side if we're faking human voices too much?
Yeah, no, it'd be interesting to see. Yeah, and the psychological research is very clear that we're in a epidemic of loneliness, right?
Yes.
And certainly in the United States, and it's not limited, just to one demographic either. It goes all the way from old people to very young people, and people aren't dating. They're not, they're not interacting with humans as much as they used to. It's certainly a worrisome trend, and increasing suicidality as well. But you talk to the people who run these big models, and lots of times people are using these models as friends, or at least advisors, whether it's on their relationships or their depression and so forth.
Yeah.
It's yeah, I agree with you, Kevin. I don't. It's to me, I'm conflicted. On the one hand, it can be very calming and so forth, and on the other hand, is that substitution a bad substitution in the long term? I think we're going to find out.
We will.
There's been some interesting research on voice. I know in the sociologic research there was a study once done about how well people detect liars, and they found out that they gave them three conditions. One was face to face, one was a video interview, and one was phone only. And it turned out that phone only was the most reliable for people finding out whether or not people were lying, which I always thought was interesting. What is it about the concentration on the voice and just the phone? The fact that you're not looking at somebody actually may help. So there's something very intimate about voice that goes very deep. And I also experienced Dr. Rita Singh from Carnegie Mellon took a 60-second sample of my voice, and with that 60 seconds was able to generate a 3D profile of my face, calculate my height within an inch, calculate my weight within 5 pounds, calculate my blood pressure within 5 points, and gave a psychological profile, and also said there was something wrong with my skeleton. Turns out that I have a metal knee. I had a knee replacement from an injury when I was 14, and it's just amazing what you can get from voice. There's a lot of information from voice, and Ashish is saying, look, the spam calls have been awfully human. Like, yes, they are. I think indistinguishable. Anyway, it's interesting. All right, we have the totals here. Ankaj.
Yes, John, coming right up.
And remember, everybody, you can always please subscribe to our YouTube channel if you're watching on YouTube, and like the channel. Also, we have our Learning Lab, 7 p.m. East Coast time on Monday, and come join us there. And we can see here we got 1 essential with Infosys and its event stuff, 3 importance and 2 optionals. All right, that's how we end our week. Fair amount of reading for the weekend, interesting stuff. And any other announcements? Kevin, anything going on in your business you want to tell the world about?
Yeah, I appreciate that. Just got back from the Data IQ Everyday AI conference in New York. Great event. A lot of people barreling ahead with AI, doing interesting things, and a lot of focus on agents.
Yes.
And for the first time, there were meaningful conversations about agent governance, which I think is critical.
Yeah.
If you have these quasi or fully autonomous agents, you got to govern what they do, monitor what they do. And hopefully that will become an area of innovation for the next 12 months. I think it's critical. At BARC, we just published a data for AI survey-based report, preparing and managing data to support AI innovation. I've been citing some of those findings here, but perhaps I could send you the link and welcome any feedback from your community.
That's great. Love that. Maybe you could present it at one of our learning labs. That'd be great.
Actually, yeah.
Amanda, any announcements?
Nope, nothing on my end, Dr. John. Thank you.
Ankaj, anything?
No, John, nothing on my end.
All righty. Well, we'll see you all on Monday. Have a great weekend, everybody. Take care. Bye-bye now.
All right. Thanks all. Take care.